What's up, guys? We are back for another just quick, simple review. In case you are listening and not watching, we're talking about Black Widow, which is the movie we built our entire Spy Month around, and also probably the biggest movie to come out in the entire year. So, it's interesting to see like a big, like legit big blockbuster back in theater. It was fun to see Quiet Place Part 2. But like, there's a big difference between that movie coming out in theaters and this movie coming out. This was.
If you're saying this is the first big blockbuster out in theaters, then you're thinking only Marvel movies are blockbusters. Because there was also, for what you've seen in theaters, but like Fast 9 and Kong vs. Godzilla, those are all in theaters.
Well, I mean, the problem with Kong vs. Godzilla is it was still like it was too early in the coming out of the pandemic. I think to.
Well, really I think like F9 was the first like big franchise blockbuster that like studios depend on.
Yeah, I'm gonna be really honest. I completely blanked Fast 9 when I was thinking about that.
That existed.
Fast 9 has made like $500 million worldwide. Yeah, it clearly counts. Although, if you actually go back and look at the amount of money it made, like opening weekend, just I think a lot less than I believe a lot less than.
It made less than Black Widow, and Black Widow also had premium sales.
Yeah, I mean, I guess which really proves that like there are stuff people will go see both in theaters. You can put stuff, you can give people the options, and people will go see it in theaters anyway. Which I guess like if you're a fan,
because they released the premium sale numbers, they like matched the ticket sales numbers. Something along the lines, but those are one times. Like once you pay those premiums, you watch the movie as much as you can for the same $30.
I'm not actually surprised by that because I think something we've seen through the entire year is that if movies do well on streaming, they also do well in theaters. Like this goes back to the In the Heights discussion. Where like In the Heights not only bombed in theaters, it also bombed as an actual streaming movie versus something like Godzilla vs. Kong, which did a lot better in streaming and also did a lot better in theaters. Like there's clearly a correlation between just general interest in the movies will drive people to watch it, whether they watch it at home or they actually go to the theaters to do it.
Yeah, it's kind of been like an equivalent number. It's been like 50% at theaters, 50% out.
Which is weird because I feel like most people assume coming in that like this idea of Premiere or HBO Max same day release was really going to screw over the theater releases. Like it was really going to hurt them. Like it was going to 90% was going to go to the home version that was cheaper and 10% was going to go to the theaters. And it's just we have not seen that happen.
It probably increases the audience, honestly, because there's probably a lot of people that would not have seen Black Widow, definitely would not have seen Kong Godzilla. But when Kong was free for them at home, then why not? When they don't have to leave their house. And $30 is a steep fee, but if they don't leave their house and they can pay for the kids, some people don't make it out to theaters. So the premium offer increases the bandwidth for the audience you can reach.
Yeah, the Premier Access is great for families with kids, especially because if you honestly think about it, $30 Premier Access is cheaper for a family of 4 than actually going to the theater.
And they might never go. They probably wait till it's at your bread box.
Right, or they rent it on Amazon Prime. We've talked about enough the industry. Black Widow clearly did very well. And I don't think that's really shocking to anyone that an MCU movie would do very well and have, Yeah, I did not realize it made $60 million on Disney Plus in the first weekend. That's sort of insane. Probably the highest grossing movie of the pandemic. That's very impressive. Let's jump into a little non-spoiler section. Give somebody who's watching an idea of this movie without giving them details. I'll go first and just say I think that Black Widow is enjoyable. It's an enjoyable film if you like this franchise, if you like the character, if you're interested to see the character kind of do more than she's been given in the past. It definitely is not a perfect film. It certainly has some flaws. It definitely does feel it has the same thing you've seen with other films where if they release the movie 4 or 5 years after where it falls in the timeline, sometimes these movies feel a little bit odd for moments in them. But I think if you like the MCU and you like this character, you will probably somewhat enjoy this movie. I would say my biggest points of caution would be twofold, which is one, this movie is very dark, and I would argue the darkest movie in the entire MCU. So like there were moments where I was sitting in theaters and, there were like kids with their parents around you in the theater. And I was like a little uncomfortable because there are some scenes in this that are more graphic and more showing something that you would not expect to see in something that is somewhat consistently family friendly as an MCU film. And then second, my second point would just be, don't go into this expecting the heights of like something like Endgame. you're not. This movie is not trying to be that. It's one of those sort of in between, smaller side story character pieces. And I think if you go in expecting that, you probably will enjoy what you get more than if you go in expecting some kind of big, bombastic, like team up movie like we've seen a lot of recently.
This is one I'm interested. There's always ones like, do you think like the true like Marvel fans will like it more, or sometimes a more sideline fan that checks in every now and then, they can like some more depending on what it has to offer to the universe as a whole. Because the sideline fans don't care about what it has to offer. And this definitely, I think, is hampered by the MCU-ness a little bit with what it wants to do, because it has to stay so loyal to not just the universe's storylines, but also the audience base that it has to tone some things down for. So it can still like kind of be a movie for kids in a way. That hurts it, but I think it stands alone as a spy movie pretty terrifically, that I can see non-MCU fans still find a lot to enjoy. I think if you're a spy movie fan and not an MCU fan, I still think there's a lot to get, because I'm glad we picked the theme, because I was always unsure on how like spyish the movie would actually be, because it was really a spy, is. But it like borrows a lot. I would say like specifically Mission Impossible, but really all the spy franchises we talked about, it can be.
I think it follows a ton from Bourne. It's very Bourne-y plot.
There's one specific thing that is a Mission Impossible thing, and that's all I can think about.
Yeah.
But you see everything we've talked about kind of homaged or inspired this movie. So I think there's enjoyment to have that, because it is just an interesting, fun thriller that also has MCU characters, MCU references, and action scenes sometimes that go a little bigger than they need to.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I think if we're going to compare it to anything we've talked about this month, I think it's Bourne, because just the fundamental structure of the Black Widow program and the way that the entire system works is just very, very reminiscent of Bourne. I see what you're talking about with Mission Impossible, but I feel like from a lot of other perspectives, like core narratives, it doesn't really line up with Mission Impossible.
There's a level of like tech and getting a team together. I think one that's in all the spy franchises, or that's in this, is also like Europeanness of it. Like they have to go to, whatchamacallit? Oh my gosh, it's the whole joke in the movie, and I can't even think of the name. Budapest. So even the use of the scenery and the traveling of it all is very spyish.
Yeah. Yes, it goes back to the place that we have been hinted at. And I don't consider that a spoiler, because Black Widow has clearly talked about Budapest before. It's been a running character arc since the first Avengers.
And also compared to the Bourne parts is the way it deals with trauma. We talked about this in our it hasn't been released in our James Bond one as well, that how that was inspired by Bourne to include a little more trauma affected spy and deal with that, and that is very real in this movie as well.
Absolutely. Let's jump over to our spoiler section so we can get all into these details. We're going to let anybody who wants to jump off, who has not seen it yet, or who is waiting, either in theaters, Disney Plus Premier Access, whatever option you choose to go by, do it, and then you can come back and let us talk in the spoiler section. So fundamentally, what this movie is sort of it's half a prequel for Black Widow's character, and also sort of a therapy session for her to allow her to deal with some past trauma and some relationships that have become fractured over time. The film starts by introducing you to young Natasha and her younger sister when they're very young, and they're Ohio in the 80s, with their mom played by Rachel Weisz and their dad played by David Harbour. Now, I'm not going to lie, when this scene started at the beginning of the movie, I was like, is there about an explosion that's going to happen? I did not realize right off the bat that this was actually the two sisters. I just was like, why are there random kids here? And
it took me a long time to realize they weren't a real family. A really long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it literally took me until the moment they literally just tell us that. Yeah. And then we get shown that this is a family. You're initially confused as a viewer because you know that she has, she dates back to Russia. That's where she comes from. That's where all like the Red Room stuff, because that stuff's been hinted at before. What is shown here is that their family was posing in Ohio and then had to flee. We go back, we run into the main villain of the piece, who is played by what's his name?
Ray Winston.
General Drykov, and we get shown this montage, which is reminiscent of like sex trafficking, and
that's the part you're talking about. That might be super brutal for other kids.
It's deeply dark for a scene. In
honestly, the more I think about it, maybe one of the biggest failures of the movie. Just because does not fit in with the rest of the movie is doing. It is so traumatic, and then it's kind of goofy because it's kind of Forrest Gumpy, and it like changes, does alternate histories with how the Red Room were involved in all these different conspiracies after watching these girls be like taken away and like lined up and more or less like tortured and mind warped. It's very like traumatizing. You're watching their trauma happen, and it's supposed to be like, but this is Black Widow fun, and they like have cause these assassinations and all this other stuff, and it's a very, I think, tone mess up.
See, I think that scene is incredibly effective overall.
And the song's horrible. That's the dumbest choice possible.
The song is a terrible choice, but I think the scene is incredibly effective. I think the problem it runs into is I think that scene is what the movie should have been more like. But the problem is you're playing in the MCU universe where you are so stuck within the tone that what they end up being forced to do throughout the movie is show something really dark, have a discussion about like forced sterilizations, and then have to cut to David Harbour dad jokes. It's at times very jarring how much they have to jump back and forth between like the really serious, scary, disturbing, loss of bodily autonomy and control aspects for this older man controlling all these younger girls, which is just creepy on baseline if he just was in charge of them. But all the actual control stuff, the physical control, the mental control, the endocrine system control, all the craziness going on. And because it's the MCU, they have to jump back and forth between like this really dark material that has to be included because it's integral to the story, and they have to make jokes because it's the MCU, and they don't think they're frustratingly at times don't trust themselves to tell a narrative without sticking to a jokey tone. And it felt like at times I wish Black Widow had gotten darker and been more Bourne or James Bond than it is like, I don't know, Kingsman or something.
It bothers me that you said integral. It's integral. I just can't. You said integral.
You can pronounce it either way. They're both correct.
I don't like this.
I believe it's British versus American. Go ahead.
But yeah, you're jumping to the point that I kind of hinted at where I said that Marvel hampered what this movie is really able to do, because it does have, the source material in the background. It is very trauma filled. It's very dark, but they can't ever fully address it. They can only hint at like what her backstory really is. This is supposed to be the movie about the Red Room, and they like show us the girls in there looking, scared, traumatized, but they can't fully describe what they go through because they have to cater to kids, essentially. This movie's not just for kids, but they still has an audience that is younger that they cannot isolate. They can't make the rated R MCU movie.
The MCU is trying to get as many people as possible.
Yes.
And so that's why they're forced in these somewhat clunky scenes where they're like, they have to like casually discuss what happens with forced sterilization or and they pheromone control.
Joke about it, hint at it, and they don't fully say like forced sterilization. They talk about fallopian tubes. They just make it like a sex talk show.
We don't have
rather than like dealing with how horrible it is that these women got like
right.
Forced their uterus.
This scene in particular is a scene where their dad makes a joke about one of them being like, on her period, and that's why she's grumpy. And it gets turned into what really should be a darker moment. She's like, I don't have any of those bits that matter anymore. Like that stuff doesn't happen to me. But it then turns into a joke about an old white guy, like not wanting to hear about lady problems.
All the like history of trauma or emotional attachment with the family, a lot of it is spoken. It's discussed. We are told that they feel this way, that they went through this, and we never actually get to experience it. Because that is with, their experiences in the Red Room and being brought up in the spiral, that is just explained that this was horrible, but we never really know what it is. We just have to take their word for it so you never fully connect to the trauma because you don't really understand it. And the same thing, because this is a movie essentially about a forced family, or if found family in a way, but it was really a forced family that they spent 3 years together. It's the only parents they ever really knew. But that like 3 minutes you get in the beginning is not enough to feel a connection. So when they get to the scenes explain, but you were my mom, and it means a lot to me, and you see how they all meant to each other by them telling that they felt like a family. It's all explained in words, but you never actually get to feel that connection from their history, because it's so quick and rushed, and you don't even know who all the characters are. So you're kind of left in a land of confusion that you can't connect to the closest of this family in a way. It's just too quick for it to be as believable when they meet at the dinner scene and Florence Pugh is saying how much they all mean to her. We just have to take her word for it. That's what this movie is. Just explain how they felt and how they mean things rather than actually showing on screen.
Yeah, it is. I saw an article earlier that some website I read that was talking about the plot holes in Black Widow, and almost all of them relate to like what's happening in the Red Room. How does the mind control work? Like they sort of just tell you it, and they hope that you'll be horrified at just the mere mention of mind control. But it would be a much more impactful, much darker, but much more impactful film if you were like, they weren't like, it wasn't just a bunch of girls locked in a storage container. It was like, they clearly mention terrible things. They talk about girls being cycled through. They talk about 1 out of 20 surviving the process. They talk about the ones who don't succeed, who aren't performing well, getting ended. He just kills them off because they're not worth it. They have all these mentions of these really terrible things. And I'm not saying we need to watch some kind of torture porn aspect where we see all these horrible events, but it would have been nice to see. It would have been nice to see some of it, because it's a weird movie because
I'm not saying you should either. It's just trying to have its cake and eat it too. It's trying to be this darker, serious movie while also being for general audiences, and you just can't take those paths. I don't think we need to see the trauma. I think the trauma doesn't even need to be there.
I think we need to see some of it. I think we need to have a better explanation, because I think that opening montage of all the people and what happens makes you kind of sick to your stomach at how disgusting and terrible this program is, and this terrible thing these two little girls who were just doing handstands in the backyard, having a good time, looking at bugs, what they had to go through after the thing. But you want
the first 10 minutes sets you up for the movie that the material would need to deal with it, address it right. The first 10 minutes does. That's why that opening montage is so stark, and I think doesn't fully work because it doesn't match the rest of the movie, because that's from the movie. It could have been. Yeah. And then after the opening credits, they're like, no, but this is our Marvel movie, and we got to make some jokes and just hint at everything.
It does really feel like that was the movie that maybe Kate Shortland wanted to direct. That was the movie that she was kind of trying to be focused on. Her thing was I want to talk about trauma and loss of female autonomy of their bodies, and all these things that are really, really relevant to the current era, and feel just really of the moment. And then I think at some point she probably had a draft of this, and they were like, yeah, we have to sell this to people. No one wants to watch this movie you've just written.
We gotta get that Disney Plus premiums. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it is weird because it's I guess it's just fundamentally a problem with Black Widow. It's how do you tell the Black Widow story when we know where she comes from? How do you tell that story in the jokey MCU format? It feels that just it's not possible to do both of those things. It feels they almost fundamentally kind of knew going into this that they were sort of playing a losing hand. The fact that it's still a movie you'd watch and enjoy is, they're clearly good at what they're doing. It's just frustrating at times that they jump back and forth between such large different tonal choices.
Yeah. Just to go into, there's a lot of criticism about, was this the right time to release it, which I think is a uninteresting argument to make. Yes, maybe they should have made it for a while, but they're scared that female superheroes don't sell toys. But I think they still make it, even after Endgame, give it purpose in existing now, because I do think part of it is giving her the closure that was denied from her in Endgame for the second time. So this coming after her death, she didn't have any emotional closure to her arc. So it says, don't worry, we'll go back. We'll fill that in so that death can seem more meaningful in a way. So we can close off some of those traumatic ideas and ideas of family. Since they just didn't have, they gave Tony Stark the closure in Endgame. And they didn't have room for her as well. So they gave her a whole movie to make that death seem more felt.
I will say, though, putting this movie now does bring up two kind of big problems narratively. And this is the problem that the MCU has for itself when they create such a tied together narrative and then release movies out of order. This probably should have been released in 2016, 2017, where it fits in, because there are two big problems. One, she never talks about the events of this film in any of the two Avengers films she's in after, which does feel a little weird that she went through such a profound, large, important change to have, and then she literally never mentions it to Steve or anyone else in this team that she calls her family. Like the fact that she never mentions her first family to her second family is a little bit odd in hindsight.
If it was released then, though, the passing of the torch as like necessary for Phase 4 for them to have their next direction would not be able to happen. They can't introduce Florence Pugh as the next essential, Black Widow in a way, because then where is she in Endgame? They need her for this phase.
Well,
so this movie exists now so they can.
Well, I mean, the problem you just mentioned still exists. Where is she and the Widows in Endgame is a big question. Why is Natasha's family the only family that doesn't show up to the final battle in Endgame?
Oh, yeah.
It's somewhat questionable. I do also think
she's working on the dark side, possibly.
I don't think so, though. Not her parents. If they're going to go flee the Widows, I think they would be as likely to show up to a battle at the end of Endgame as like all the random Doctor Strange people we've never met before. I don't know. It does feel a little weird at times. I'm trying to think. There's another thing about it that caught me off. It might have been that. It's weird because it does feel tonally it fits more in this era of the MCU than it does back then, but it does feel like it is weird that she never mentions it. And also it somewhat invalidates the death scene and the argument between her and Clint Barton, where she's claiming he needs to survive because he has a family, and it's like, well, now we know you have a family too. So this is a little bit weird that you're both trying, you're the one who gets sacrificed in that moment.
A family. I mean, she says the corny line, "I have two families," but I still think that she has a little bit of a disconnect between what having children and what he has with her sort of family.
Of course, but I think it makes that moment less cut and dry than it seems at the time. And I just think this is the problem that the MCU always has, and I think
that argument was always bad, anyways, and he should have died because he just murdered a bunch of people.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is I think that it's frustrating at times because the MCU keeps doing this to their female characters, and I think both Black Widow and Captain Marvel suffer from a lot of the same things, which is that they really should have made these movies. They should have just been bold and made these movies in the moment that they wanted to set them, and instead they have this weird tendency to wait years.
So they should have made Captain Marvel in the 1990s.
No, but you could have made Captain Marvel in in Phase 1 in the same era you're doing Thor in the first Captain America.
The issue with that is her powers are so strong in Galactic, and they were not in Galactic. I guess they have Thor, but for the most part, to start going with aliens in space took a little bit, and have someone so super powered. I think the Captain Marvel argument is better than the Black Widow. They probably should have just made the Black Widow movie earlier. I think everyone's been also saying this for forever. Is you should have made this movie earlier. I understand what they wanted to, what they ended up doing, but I think, to be honest, they could have made a Black Widow movie 4 years ago. Yeah, and the focus just wouldn't have been on turning her sister. It would have been a different story.
I think it would have been the same story. It just wouldn't have been so focused on getting her sister to be the next generation. Let's talk a little more of the story. So then we cut to the current day. Natasha's hiding out. She's being chased by General Ross, which is kind of the fallout of the Sokovia Accords. She has this guy who keeps getting her stuff. She's hiding out in Norway or something. Her sister Yelena is involved in a mission and gets shot in the face with this red gas stuff, which basically breaks the mind warp. Then she starts escaping. Natasha is attacked by Taskmaster, who is the quote unquote villain of the piece, which we can talk about in a second. The problem of the piece. The villain is Ray Winston, but that's the famous character though. He's the big boss. Yes. So the problem is the annoyance causing irritation and coming in because he's more just a henchman. Taskmaster is a henchman. Yeah, we'll talk about Taskmaster in a second. And then we have the sisters meet up. They fight some people. They have all the gas files. They go pull the dad out of the prison where he's in prison. They go meet the mom where she's like training pigs. This moment is sort of when the movie gets a little bit goofy but it is sort of spy-like. They hatch this incredibly complex plan in like 30 seconds. And they all end up on the Red Room, which is actually a floating thing in the sky.
They are like trained super spies that I think you can be led to believe they can do a super complex plan in 30 seconds.
No, I'm not saying it's a terrible thing. It's just a very spy thing to like pull off a ridiculously complex, 7-step plan.
With like weird tech and like speakers and masks and wigs. There's like so much involved to this real quick. Yeah, this is the Mission Impossible thing to me.
Yeah, they do the face. They use the face coverage technology that they used in Winter Soldier to cause the mom and Black Widow to switch faces. And so Black Widow goes up and fights Dreykov, and she has to like break her own nose because one of the creepiest things in the film is that he has locked all his widows with pheromone locks so they can't attack him if they can smell him, which is somewhat profoundly disturbing and very weird. It's real creepy. And then the dad fights Taskmaster. The sister goes after all the other Black Widows so she can all break all their mind control. The mom starts crashing into the ground. Fight scenes. Taskmaster is revealed to be the daughter of Dreykov, the one that supposedly Natasha thought she killed in Budapest when she was trying to kill him years before.
Known actress with like 5 seconds of FaceTime.
Known actress who doesn't really do a lot, if we're being honest.
No, she kind of. I feel like Bond kind of started her and killed her at one time.
Well, she wasn't. She was just like a. Wasn't she like a? She was like a model, and then she like started doing a couple movies, and she got like a Bond girl role. But then everyone was like, "Yeah, you. That's all you can kind of do is play Bond girls." Like, and then she has some other. She's like in Seven Psychopaths and Oblivion and The Water Diviner and Death of Stalin. She has like some roles, but she's not.
Never giving a lot of acting to do in any of these.
No, definitely not. And this is one of like, this is a very classic MCU thing that definitely is a little bit annoying. That Natasha's trauma was feeling that she'd had to kill a little girl as collateral damage to go after the dad, and then realizing she hadn't got the dad and realizing she'd killed a small child and hadn't accomplished her mission, only to be revealed to the last moment, oh, yeah, the daughter's still alive, and like she's now controlled by Dreykov too. So I don't really know that much about Taskmaster as a character, but I did a little bit of research. He, in the comics, is this other dude. He's a male character. He's based in a former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. He's got all these skills, but he's more of a villain, and he usually is not related to other characters. So the weird thing in this film is it was a kind of a weird choice to make Taskmaster the villain, because they just like kind of faked somebody's death and then threw her body in the thing, and like it's sort of a kind of sloppy plot. Like I'm not really sure why they needed to use Taskmaster for this character. I don't think it really adds anything to the movie or does anything really that interesting. And in some ways, it really wastes the Taskmaster abilities. The idea of like this person can copy everyone you know and everyone's skills, and then there's like minimal scenes that show that the Taskmaster is actually mimicking like Avengers or people that Natasha knows.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Taskmaster is. I don't read enough comics, but my idea is people mainly think it's cool because of the look, which I kind of hate the look. It's too much, just like Grim Reaperness. It's like very edgecore. Not for me. So I feel like because the comic book look is a lot more skeletonish than they do in here. It's more of an armor in this movie. So that's what I think Taskmaster is a cool costume. I don't think there is much story behind the characters as far as I know. So what else are you going to do with it if you want to make the character interesting and a little more fleshed out? I'm kind of fine with it. I think it helps make Ray Winston's character seem even more evil, and in a way provides maybe not a fair way forgiveness for or redemption for Black Widow, because she didn't actually kill the daughter, so she has that guilt kind of off her shoulders, and it's a redemption because she gets to rescue who she thought murdered. She gets to help convince her to come back to light, and the real villain was the father is so evil that he even mind controls his own daughter. So how can you feel bad about killing the daughter when he doesn't really care? She's just a weapon to him. Anyways, While we're on Taskmaster, I just want to say I'm probably making this up because I Googled this for Easter eggs, and I can't find anything. And so I must be making up. I swear when the last action scene or like big action scene with Taskmaster, and they talk about the duplicating skills, and they specify she can duplicate the skills of all her favorite heroes. That's what she says. All her favorite that exist in the world. And I swear she does a Wolverine pose right after that. So it's like a hint at Wolverine being the universe. But I swear she does a claws thing. So she's like duplicating the skills of that superhero. But maybe it's a Black Widow thing.
You know what? I'm pretty sure it's a Black Panther thing from.
It is a Black Panther.
Remember the first time you see the character, she's watching film of Black Panther doing the claws thing and fighting in Civil War
thing. I just knew a claws thing, and all I could think of was Wolverine.
That
would be something Marvel does. They would throw that little movement in as a hint, X-Men might come. They exist in this world.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing.
Yeah, it's Black Panther. You're right.
That's because it's claws. It's smaller claws like cat rather than huge claws like Wolverine. Then we basically have a giant fight, and at the end of the film, General Ross is coming for Natasha, and everybody else is leaving. And then they run into the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character in the post-credit scene. That's where Florence Pugh's character runs into her. And she seems to be mad, potentially, at Clint Barton. So that'll be part of the Hawkeye TV show that's upcoming.
Yeah. The assumption is that she's going to be part of the Thunderbolts, which may be under the lead of Thunderbolt Ross. And that's what Julia Louis-Dreyfus is kind of working for and recruiting for. And
yeah, there's a lot of
who's going to be on that team is kind of rumored and thrown around, but this seems like she is one of those characters.
She's definitely going to be in the Hawkeye TV show. She's confirmed to be in that.
Definitely going to be in the Hawkeye TV show.
Yep. Along with Kate Bishop, played by Hailey Steinfeld. So that should actually be kind of interesting to see what happens going on there. Let's talk about let's start do a little character discussion. As we talked the story wise, I don't think there's a lot to talk about the story. It's sort of straightforward. We have our beefs with the tonality of it. Let's talk about Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff or Black Widow. It's weird. She's kind of spent the entire time as an Avenger, as the back burner Avenger. She's almost always the character that kind of is in the background and somewhat less important than the others in basically every film, including that very bizarre introduction in Iron Man 2. And then they made a
I think once she becomes a pretty big deal in Winter Soldier and stuff, she becomes more important. She becomes a more important character through the Captain America universe. But during Avengers and Iron Man 2, definitely not great.
Yeah, her literal introduction is
definitely
she's an intern that Tony wants to bang. That's the entire introduction of the character, which is kind of interesting. And sort of cringe looking back. I do think the weird thing for her is that she sort of gets overshadowed by other characters in this film. I think Pugh is just better.
I think that's partly purposeful.
Oh, I'm not saying it's unintentional. I just think...
just how her character is designed. She's a little more of a straight face. Her attitude is very controlled. Her demeanor is controlled. So she's never going to fully pop. But I still think it's a very well-controlled performance. I think she knows this character and she knows how to deal with the trauma in the right way. It's just on paper a little more of a boring character. She's just not as charming as Florence Pugh is able to do with this, younger, youthful, more exuberantly expressive character than Black Widow. She's not an expressive person.
Yeah. I just also think, unfortunately, that character is not as interesting as some of the other ones. Her sister is more emotional because she's so recent to the Black Widow program that in some ways that makes her trauma more recent.
She is recovered.
She just got out of it. Well, Natasha's a little bit more aloof to it because it's been so long since she had to deal with all that stuff. The parents are played by Rachel Weisz and David Harbour. I think I like what both are doing, although it frustrates me the role that Harbour is given because it feels like he's a lot of the comedy that's forced to bounce off all the more serious stuff, which is why the tonally it kind of struggles at times.
Yeah, which is similar how he's used in my God, what's the No Sudden Move? Thank you. I always want to call it Never Back Down. And No Sudden Move, he's also
isn't that like that teenage street fighting movie?
Yeah. Not oblivious isn't the right word, but like not fully, aware and kind of dumb comic relief, which he is in both. Which I don't know if is the best use of his skills. Because I feel like him played manic and goofballish is a little over the top. He just seems so sweaty. Like physically, he looks sweaty when he's trying to act goofy.
I mean, it's a weird combination where like I enjoy the character in the abstract, but I'm frustrated by the fact that he's always the comedy right after they have the dark moment. So like I like what Harbour is doing, but I don't like necessarily the role he's given to play in the film. Like to me, it's frustrating that like it's like every time there's a serious moment they talk about like trauma, it's like and David Harbour makes a joke. And
there's something about his energy in both these movies that makes me very anxious. He just kind of makes me anxious. I feel like he would overwhelm me as a person.
Yeah, he's also just an interesting character because he's like a former superhero for Soviet Union. And like we get no explanation of like where he came from.
He's a Russian Captain America. He's a super soldier. He has a super soldier serum. So he's the only superpowered person in this movie.
Did you like the Crimson Dynamo joke?
I don't understand the joke.
Crimson Dynamo is like a Iron Man villain.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I only know this
is it a Soviet?
Yes, it's another Soviet one. Yeah, it was just funny they called him Crimson Dynamo. Oh, that was a good small moment. And then like I don't know, Olga Kurylenko it's hard to talk like she's a famous person. You would think she has a nothing role. She's a prop.
I mean, I assume she's not even in the suit because what would the purpose of her being in the suit be? So you just really for her face to look mind controlled and not there and damaged. Her like damaged beauty in a way. Maybe that's why you cast her because she is a model, so you can scar and torture her to make it more depressing, which seems very misogynistic. But
yeah. And then Dreykov.
I liked him. Honestly, I liked him.
I think he's a good like evil like older Soviet dude. I do think he's the biggest example of like my God, the accent work in this movie is very iffy to bad.
He's
awful. He's
a New York mobster that spent too much time in Russia.
He's a London. He's a London.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He's a London mobster. He's a British mobster.
Which is essentially what Ray Winston is.
Well, yeah, it's Ray Winston.
Yeah. He's basically taking his character from oh my God, I'm forgetting the movie. Sexy Beast. He's pretty much playing his Sexy Beast character and just putting them in Russia.
I actually think Harbour and Pugh's accents are good. I think Wise is a little bizarre because she's the one who's been in Russia the most and seems like she should have a thicker accent. It makes sense. I don't fault Natasha for not having a thicker accent because she's clearly spent a lot of her time outside
they got
of Russia.
rid of that after like Iron Man 2 or something.
Oh, I don't think she's ever had it.
She had it for a little bit at some point.
No, you're thinking about the twins. You're thinking about Scarlet Witch is the one who had the crazy accent.
Let's not deal with this.
That was atrocious.
Do you think they're going to deal with that with Florence Pugh? They're going to be like, okay, people get the point that you're Russian. Now you can just pretend to not do an accent anymore.
Honestly, I would just let Pugh do her thing because Pugh's actually consistent with her accent. Like her accent worked as like it sounded more normal. Like the problem with Winstone at times, like some of the other, the problem with Elizabeth Olsen's accent was she sounded like she was doing an accent. Pugh just sounds like
they brought it back, and you didn't watch.
This is great.
WandaVision, but they did bring it back at moments as part of the like playing of it. They did bring the accent back.
I would just let Pugh do it. Honestly, I think her accent works. Her and Harbour are the two that work. Because it's consistent. The weird thing that happens with people like Winstone or Weiss
Harbour's is a little more of like a parody accent character. It sounds like an American person doing a Russian joke, but it's fine. It doesn't need to be great, and he's a goofy character.
It's not even like I don't think either accent is like amazing accent. We're not going to nominate it for some kind of award. I just think for me, like the fact that Harbour and Pugh are at least consistently one accent. The problem I have with Winstone and Weiss is that at times they have like they figured out that like certain words or certain letters of the alphabet sound better. Like you can literally lean into the Russianness, and so they're leaning really heavy into Russianness on some words and just completely ignoring it on others, and that's why they just sound like
they're both a little mumbly as their version of a Russian accent. They kind of just mumble some words.
Yeah, I'm actually enjoying what Harbour does accent with. I think that's pretty.
But Harbour is basically like the version of someone doing Italian is be like a pizza, la mamma mia. He's doing the Russian version of that.
Harbour is essentially doing like a Russian Viking is sort of
vodka.
Yes, and tells a disgusting story about his father, which is, a pretty. It's one of his. This is a way to go back to a second. It's not that his jokes don't work, because they do work and they are kind of funny. Yeah. It's funny that he gets off the plane with the girls for the first time he's seen in years, and he asks Natasha instantly about, does Captain America talk about him? Which we've already proven in the film is nonsense, because like Captain America was frozen when this guy started working, so he's never met Captain America.
Maybe that's why it makes me anxious. It's just that like earnestness to be like accepted as a hero just makes me like anxious.
He said that like he based it partially off him and the director talked about Ricky Gervais on The Office. So it is very explainable if you think about like a David Brent, Michael Scott character as a Russian super spy, where they're superhero, but also they're just like deeply insecure and want everybody to like them.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Well, I think Rachel Weisz and Ray Winston kind of rule in this movie. I think Rachel Weisz has the opposite. She has like a calming presence, but she also gets to be the one kind of twist in this, even though it's a quickly undone twist. But she has to play villainous at moments, or like suspiciously villainous, and then play the hero. And she gets to play a scientist, and she has such intelligence that she admits on screen, but also she gets to do a little bit of like spy badassery, and she can do all those arrows. I think she's a very versatile actress, and it's used wisely in this film. And Ray Winston is a fucking Bond villain. He's just like there to be evil and like conquer the world. And there's something about just the pure evilness that he's able to come off in that London gangsteriness that I found enjoyable in a way. Because it makes he has the presence that excuses the lack of story arc for the villains that I think too often MCU fans complain about bad villains because they want like Thanos level arcs to them. But like sometimes it's got to be like villainous and engaging and fun to watch and not root for, but just intimidating in a way. And I think I'm a lot easier on most Marvel villains than other people are.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the big problem with the MCU is that, well, it's not even a problem. It's that the MCU has made a conscious choice to focus on their heroes. If they wanted, they could do the villain role. They just have to do a Dark Knight where you literally focus more on the villain than you focus on the hero. Like, that's just...
Which was, in a way, their Thanos use. And in some parts, I think, Killmonger a little bit.
Yeah. I like Winstone. He's disgusting and, like, creepy Greasy. And perverse and, like,
looks like he would run the Red Room and use all women as...
Yeah, he looks like he also sort of looks like a pig. And it sort of just fits. Yeah, I mean, Rachel Weisz is actually interesting because she gets some of the most complex moments in the film where she is the scientist who kind of just thinks she's doing good for her nation and then is inadvertently kind of, she's oblivious to the use of all the science that she's creating. She's just doing all the science. She's like, look at all this cool science I'm doing with pigs. And then her daughters are like, yeah, this is the shit they used on us. Like, I think that's actually quite an impactful.
It's almost like The Wind Rises, where the guy just wants to create planes. He doesn't know if it's dropping bombs. It's just like science and art for the sake of it. I don't know how it's.
Well, it's actually a lot of science.
It's not responsible. Yeah.
Well, it's the same with like a lot of World War II stuff. Like, people were just like, yeah, we just want to make planes, or we wanted to make, like, Zyklon B was not created to kill people. It was created for like a bunch of other uses by scientists, and then it gets inadvertently turned into this horrific thing by the evil people who take the science's work and use it. And then, sometimes scientists are oblivious to that, and she's kind of an example of that in the film. Yeah, I think we talked about Black Widow. Do you have any more thoughts, or we want to just do a quick where this ranks in the MCU and then move on?
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think pretty enjoyable. I think we sounded more negative, but I think we're just like more because I think everything we like about this movie is just pretty traditional with why I think we're both considered Marvel fans, so we still enjoy it because we're fans of these type of movies, we're fans of spy movies, and it's thrilling. But there's always going to be things that bother us that just is more interesting to talk about and stick out more. So that's what creates the more like negative based conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not trying to be negative, but I think we would both agree that like the biggest thing for us that we kind of walked out of the movie was like it's frustrating that the fact that they jump back and forth tonally so much. Like they have this really dark moments and then they have goofy moments, and it's just kind of that's frustrating at times.
You see the strain, you see them being strained by the Marvelness of it. Because otherwise, it could easily be the female born. Because once you said that, it definitely is born because it is. He's also being used by an agency, the trauma of being used by this
mind control.
This movie wants to deal with it in the same kind of grounded, intense way, but can't really address it.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been nice to see what is the harder PG-13 version / R version of this. Because I think here's the thing. You can make a harder PG-13 version of this. They've done it with Bond. They've done it with Bourne. You could have done that darker movie, and you didn't have to change the.
Oh yeah, it doesn't need to be R. It's just
not you can do it PG-13.
It's just not going to be as friendly for kids because just the content's a little more trigger warning-ish, a little darker.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do a quick little. We are not going to do a full ranking of the MCU because we have this movie, and then we have Eternals and Shang-Chi and Spider-Man. We have a bunch more coming, so we'll
save Spider-Man end of the year.
We'll save it to the last MCU movie of 2021 to give you guys a new appraisal of our rankings. What I wanted to do really quickly was do where did you rank this out of 24, and like what's right in front of it and what's right behind it. Zach, do you want to go first?
Oh man, I lost my rankings. All right, so I have it at 12. So basically exactly in the middle, which is kind of how I feel about it. So I have it right after Infinity War, which I think would be a pretty big separation for me, but I think more compared to like these are some of how much I like the movie. Right after I have Ant-Man and Dash-Man.
Okay. So you have it 12. I have it 15. I think I just like some more MCU movies. It's to me, it's right behind Infinity War, and like right ahead of like the Iron Man 2 Captain Marvel class.
Yeah, that's rude to Captain Marvel, but I'm starting to think I'm Captain Marvel's biggest fan.
I like Captain Marvel. I just I don't know. Even on rewatch, I find myself not finding as many really impressive stuff in that film than I wish there would. Yeah. So that now you know what we thought of Black Widow. Now you know what we thought where it is ranked in our MCU. We will give you full rankings, and you will get you'll get like small glimpses each time we do an MCU movie for the rest of the year, and then with our final MCU movie, we'll do the big ones. This was fun. We will be back soon. You will be getting the Bourne Identity review, or Bourne Identity main podcast on Saturday, and then upcoming is after that is probably going to be a review for Space Jam: A New Legacy, the new Space Jam film. We hope you join in for all of that. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and have a good night. Peace out.
I love you. Good riddance.